My name is Margaret. I'm 58 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. Just 5 days ago, my own daughter Cassandra and my son-in-law Marcus pushed my husband Thomas and me off a 100-foot cliff. As I lay there broken and bleeding, I heard my husband's desperate whisper, "Margaret, don't move. Play dead." But you know what? That wasn't even the worst of it. The worst was when Thomas revealed the most terrible truth a mother could ever hear. A secret our children had kept for 28 years. For 35 years Thomas and I built what we thought was the perfect family. We woke up every morning in our little ranch-style home in the suburbs of Atlanta where the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sound of cardinals singing in the magnolia trees. I worked as a librarian at the county library, and every afternoon I came home with stories about the regulars who came in. Thomas had his auto repair shop where he fixed cars with a skill that made people drive from 3 counties away. His hands, rough yet gentle, could diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it run. We had 2 daughters, Sarah, our firstborn, and Cassandra, 7 years younger. Sarah was the light of our home, always laughing, always helping her father at the shop, always protecting me from any worries. Cassandra was different, more withdrawn, but I loved her with the same intensity. As a mother, you never play favorites, or at least that's what I thought. On Sundays after service at Mount Zion Baptist Church, the whole family would gather around our pine dining table that Thomas had refinished with his own hands. Sarah would tell us her plans to study business management, while Cassandra would remain silent, just pushing food around on her plate. Life was simple but beautiful. In the evenings, Thomas and I would walk the trail around Stone Mountain, talking about our dreams, how we'd watch our grandchildren grow, and how we'd grow old together in that very house. I never imagined those walks were training for the one that almost killed me. On weekends, I'd host family gatherings where my sisters, Dorothy and Evelyn, would come with their husbands and children. The house would fill with laughter, kids running everywhere, women sharing recipes in the kitchen while the men worked on somebody's car in the driveway. Thomas was my perfect partner. After 35 years of marriage, he still brought me wildflowers he'd pick from the roadside on his way home from work. He helped me organize book drives for the library, and I would hand him tools while he worked under the hood of a car. We were a team, an unbreakable unit, or so I thought. At night, we'd sit on the back porch watching fireflies, planning our future. We talked about traveling when we retired, finally seeing Niagara Falls, maybe buying a little cabin in the mountains once our girls started their own families. But perfect happiness, as I would discover years later, often hides the deepest tragedies. When Sarah turned 23, something changed in our family. She began to argue with Cassandra about things I didn't understand. I'd hear them whispering in the hallway and they'd fall silent when I appeared. Thomas told me it was just sister stuff and that it would pass. I wanted to believe him because I needed to believe my family was still perfect. One night in September, exactly 28 years ago, Sarah didn't come home from her evening jog. We waited until midnight, then 1 o'clock, then 2 in the morning. Cassandra was in her room supposedly studying for community college exams, but I noticed something strange in her eyes whenever I asked about her sister. Thomas went out to search for her with our neighbors. They checked every corner of our subdivision, every trail, every place Sarah used to go. At dawn, they found her body at the bottom of Sweetwater Creek Ravine. The police said it was an accident, that she had probably stumbled in the dark on the rocky trail. I never questioned that version because I couldn't imagine that the truth was much more horrible. Sarah's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore my only black dress, the same one I'd worn at my mother's funeral. Cassandra was strangely calm for someone who had just lost her older sister. While I cried until I had no tears left, she remained silent with an expression that now, after what I know, sends shivers down my spine. Thomas never left my side all day, holding me up when my legs gave out, whispering words of comfort that I now know tasted bitter in his mouth. After Sarah's death, Cassandra changed completely. She became more attentive, more loving, as if she were trying to make up for something. She helped me with chores around the house, accompanied her father to the shop, and brought me things when she saw I was sad. I thought it was her way of dealing with grief, of filling the void Sarah had left behind. How naive I was. What she was really doing was building a perfect mask to hide the monster inside. The years passed and the wound never fully healed, but we learned to live with it. Cassandra married Marcus, a charming man from Columbus who worked in sales, and they seemed happy. They had 3 beautiful children, and I finally felt like life was giving us a second chance at happiness. Marcus called me Mom and helped Thomas fix things around the house when they visited. Cassandra had opened a small catering business and seemed to be doing well. Everything seemed perfect again. But now, lying at the bottom of this gorge in the North Georgia mountains with my ribs broken and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, I understand that all that happiness was a carefully constructed lie. The first signs that something was wrong began 8 months ago when Thomas and I decided to update our will. We had saved our entire lives. And between the house, the retirement accounts, some rental property Thomas had bought years ago, and our savings, we had nearly $275,000 to leave our children and grandchildren. It was Cassandra who suggested we visit the estate attorney. Mom, Daddy, you're both almost 60 now. It's important to have everything in order, she told us with that smile that now seems sinister. Marcus would nod beside her, patting my hand with those fingers that would later push me to my death. We love you both so much and we want to make sure you're protected, he added in his smooth voice. How foolish I was to interpret those words as genuine love. The lawyer, an older gentleman named Mr. Harrison whom we had known for years, explained the options. We could put everything in a trust, divide the inheritance among Cassandra's children, or simply make a traditional will. Cassandra insisted on naming her and Marcus as our sole heirs, arguing that they would handle the equitable distribution to the grandchildren. Besides, she said, you're going to need us when you're older. It's better for us to have access to the resources to take care of you properly. Something in her tone made me uncomfortable, but Thomas seemed convinced. My husband, who had always been more trusting than me, accepted the proposal without much resistance. I had my doubts, especially since I remembered how Sarah had always talked about helping us financially when we got older. My oldest daughter had plans, dreams of taking care of us when the time came, but Sarah was gone and Cassandra was our only surviving child. We signed the papers on a Thursday afternoon. I remember Marcus was wearing an expensive-looking suit and gave me a big hug after the ceremony. Now we're officially a united family forever, he whispered in my ear. His words gave me a chill then, though I didn't understand why. Cassandra squeezed her father's hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That night as I prepared dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. The following weeks were strange. Cassandra and Marcus started visiting us more often. But their visits had a different feel. They no longer came just to spend time with family. They always had suggestions about how we should improve the house, what investments we should make, or what life insurance policies we should get. Mom, you should think about selling this big house and moving somewhere smaller, Marcus said while examining our furniture with calculating eyes. We could help you find a nice condo in Buckhead. But I loved our house. Every corner held a memory. Every room told a story of our 35 years of marriage. The kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals for my family. The garage where Thomas created his magic with engines. The yard where our children and grandchildren had played. I couldn't imagine my life anywhere else. When I told them this, I saw a flicker of irritation in Cassandra's eyes that chilled me to the bone. Mama, you're being irrational, she said in a tone she had never used with me before. This house is too big for 2 people your age. If you fall down those stairs or something happens, we won't be able to help you in time. Marcus nodded vigorously, adding, besides, the maintenance must cost a fortune. It would be much smarter to sell now while the real estate market is high and move to something more appropriate for your age. Thomas began to consider their arguments. My husband, who had always been practical, started talking about the logic behind their suggestions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more behind all this pressure. One night, after another of these tense conversations, I asked Thomas if he didn't think it was strange that Cassandra was suddenly so interested in our financial affairs. Margaret, she just cares about us, he replied while brushing his teeth. Maybe we should consider their suggestions. We're not as young as we used to be. But I saw something in my husband's eyes, a shadow of doubt he didn't want to acknowledge. Now I know that Thomas already had his suspicions, that he had started to connect the dots that I didn't even know existed. Things escalated when Cassandra suggested we give her and Marcus power of attorney over our finances. It's just for precaution, she explained while Marcus prepared sweet tea in our kitchen as if he owned the place. If one of you gets sick or has a health issue, we can manage your affairs without legal complications. The way she said it so naturally, so logically, it almost convinced me. But there was something about her insistence that made me nervous. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Thomas's breathing beside me, trying to understand why I felt so uneasy. The next day I decided to call my sister Dorothy for advice. Dorothy had always been sharper than me, more suspicious of people's intentions. When I told her about Cassandra's pressure, she was silent for a long moment. "Margaret," she finally said, "doesn't it seem strange to you that Cassandra is so anxious to control your money? I mean, Marcus has his sales job. They seem to be doing fine. Why would they need so much control over your finances?" Her words hit me like a slap. He was right. Cassandra had never seemed to have financial problems, had never borrowed money, had never shown any signs of needing our financial help. That afternoon, when Cassandra came for another of her talks about our future, I decided to confront her directly. "Daughter," I said as we sat in the living room, "why is it so important for you to have control over our financial affairs? Your father and I are still in our right minds." Her reaction was immediate and telling. Her face hardened, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that reminded me of someone else, something cold, calculating, and dangerous. "Mama, it's not about control," she responded in a tense voice. "It's about love, care, and family responsibility." But the way she said family responsibility sounded more like a threat than an expression of affection. Marcus, who had been silent until then, intervened with his smooth but firm voice. "Margaret, we just want what's best for you. It's painful to see you worry about things we could easily handle." That night, after they left, Thomas and I had our first serious argument in years. He thought I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where there were none. I insisted something wasn't right, that our daughter's behavior had changed too much. "Thomas," I said as we washed the dishes, "do you remember what Cassandra was like before Sarah died? She was different, more distant, I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about her that scared me." My husband stopped washing the plate in his hands and looked at me intently. In his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen before, recognition. "Margaret," he said in a very low voice, "there are things about Sarah's death that I never told you." My heart began to pound so hard I thought it would beat out of my chest. Thomas's words hit me like a lightning bolt. "What about Sarah's death?" I asked with a trembling voice. My husband sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, the same table where we had shared thousands of family meals, where Sarah used to spread out her textbooks, and where Cassandra had always remained silent. Thomas ran his hands over his face as if he were trying to erase the memories that had tormented him for 28 years. "The night Sarah died," he began in a broken voice, "Cassandra wasn't in her room studying like she told us. I saw her leave the house around 7:30. I followed her because something about her attitude worried me. She'd been very strange those days, more aggressive, more resentful." My husband paused, looking at his hands as if the terrible truth he had kept for so long was written on them. "I saw them arguing by the creek. Margaret, I heard them screaming horrible things at each other." My world began to spin. What were they arguing about? I whispered, even though part of me no longer wanted to know the answer. Thomas looked up and I saw tears in his eyes. Tears he hadn't even shed at our oldest daughter's funeral. "About the inheritance, Margaret. Cassandra was furious because Sarah was the oldest, because according to family traditions she would inherit most of our assets. But there was something more, something about money that Sarah had found." "What money?" I asked, feeling the ground vanish beneath my feet. Thomas sighed deeply before continuing. 4 days before she died, Sarah came to talk to me at the shop. She had discovered that Cassandra had been stealing money from our savings account. Small amounts at first, but then larger sums. Sarah had proof. She'd been investigating for months. My mind refused to process what I was hearing. My youngest daughter, the one who had been so attentive after Sarah's death, the one who helped and cared for us, had been stealing from us since before her sister died. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I accused Thomas, feeling the betrayal multiply twofold. "Because when I got to the creek that night it was already too late," he replied in a choked voice. "I saw Cassandra standing next to Sarah's body. Our youngest daughter was trembling, crying, and repeating over and over, 'It was an accident. It was an accident.' She looked at me with those desperate eyes and begged me to help her. 'Daddy,' she said, 'Sarah tripped when she was trying to hit me. I just defended myself and she lost her balance.' Tears ran down my cheeks uncontrollably. 'But you believed her,' I murmured, even though I already knew the answer. Thomas nodded slowly with an expression of guilt that had gnawed at him for decades. 'She was my daughter, Margaret. My youngest daughter was asking for my help and Sarah was already dead. I couldn't bring one back to life by destroying the other. I thought it was really an accident, that Cassandra had learned her lesson, that she would become a better person after this. And the stolen money? I asked, needing to know every detail of this nightmare. Cassandra promised she would pay it back little by little, that she had taken the money to invest in a business idea that had gone wrong. She swore she would never do something like that again. And I believed her, Margaret. God forgive me, but I believed her because I needed to believe my daughter wasn't a killer. I got up from the table, stumbling, holding on to the wall so I wouldn't fall. Everything I had believed about my family, about my surviving daughter, about the last 28 years of my life, was a lie. Did she pay the money back? I asked, although I already knew the answer from the look on Thomas's face. Never, he replied. In fact, she kept stealing small amounts that I pretended not to notice because confronting her would mean admitting I had covered up a murder. I became her accomplice, Margaret. Every time I stayed silent, every time I pretended not to see the bank accounts dwindle, I became more of her accomplice. The horrible reality began to take shape in my mind. That's why she's so interested in controlling our finances now, I murmured. It's not because she cares about us. It's because she wants to finish what she started 28 years ago. Thomas nodded gravely. And there's something else, Margaret. Something I just discovered a few weeks ago. What else could there be? I asked, feeling like my heart couldn't take any more revelations. Thomas went to his desk and pulled out some papers he had been hiding under other documents. I've been discreetly investigating Cassandra and Marcus's finances. His sales career isn't doing as well as they want us to believe. In fact, they're on the verge of losing everything. They owe more than $150,000 to several creditors and the IRS. The papers trembled in my hands as I read the numbers. Cassandra wasn't the successful woman she pretended to be. She was a desperate failure who had been living on lies and stolen money for decades. Does Marcus know all this? I asked, remembering his smooth smile and calculated hugs. I'm sure he does, Thomas replied. I've noticed how he directs the conversations when they talk about our money. How he asks specific questions about our retirement accounts, the value of the house, our life insurance policies. They aren't innocent questions, Margaret. They are questions from someone calculating exactly how much our deaths are worth. That sentence chilled me to the bone. Our deaths, I repeated in a whisper. It was the first time I had considered that Cassandra might want to cause us physical harm. Until that moment, I thought she just wanted to rob or cheat us. But if she had killed her own sister for money, what would stop her from killing her parents for the same reason? Thomas, I said, grabbing his hands, we have to go to the police. We have to tell them the truth about Sarah and about what's happening now. But my husband shook his head with a look of hopelessness that broke my heart. With what evidence, Margaret? I'm an accomplice to covering up a murder. If I talk now, I'll go to jail too. And besides, who's going to believe an old man of 63 who has been keeping this secret for 28 years? He was right. So we just wait for her to kill us like she killed Sarah? We're going to be very careful, Thomas said, trying to sound more confident than he really was. We're going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence too. But his words were interrupted by the sound of the phone. It was Cassandra. Hi, Mama, she said with that sweet voice that now sounded sinister to me. Marcus and I were thinking, and we believe it would be beautiful to celebrate your 35th wedding anniversary with something special. How about we take you to those mountains in North Georgia you've always talked about this weekend? We could go on a family hike, take pictures, and have a perfect day together. My blood turned to ice. I looked at Thomas, who had heard the conversation and had the same look of terror on his face. That's a very sweet idea, baby, I managed to reply in a trembling voice. But let us think about it and we'll get back to you tomorrow. After hanging up, Thomas and I looked at each other in silence, knowing we had just received an invitation to our own execution. The mountains, I murmured. She's going to take us to the mountains to kill us and make it look like an accident, just like she did with Sarah at the creek. Thomas nodded gravely. That night, we didn't sleep a minute, holding each other in our bed, planning how we could save ourselves from our own daughter. The next few days were a nightmare of terror and pretense. Thomas and I had to act as if nothing had happened when Cassandra and Marcus came to visit, smiling when they talked about the mountain trip, nodding when they excitedly told us about spending quality family time together. But inside, every fiber of my being screamed with fear. I knew I was looking into the eyes of my oldest daughter's murderers, and that now they were planning to do the same to me and my husband. Marcus arrived on Tuesday afternoon with a shopping bag and that radiant smile that now seemed like the grimace of a demon. "Margaret, dear," he said, hugging me with those arms that would soon push me to my death. "I picked up some supplies for our mountain adventure. Trail mix, bottled water, fruit, everything we'll need for the day hike." He showed me the contents of the bag as if he were an excited child, but I could only think about how each of those items could be used to cover up our murders. "I also brought my new GoPro," he added, pulling out an expensive action camera. "I want to capture every moment of this special day. These are going to be memories we'll treasure forever." The irony of his words made me sick. The only footage he would capture would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of some cliff, if anyone ever found us. Cassandra appeared behind him carrying new-looking hiking gear. "Daddy," she said to Thomas with feigned enthusiasm, "I bought all the necessary equipment for a safe hike. First aid kit, emergency blankets, flashlights, rope." Every word that came out of her mouth sounded like a cruel mockery. Safety equipment to plan our murders. The perversity of the situation made me dizzy. "Isn't it a bit dangerous for people our age?" I asked, trying to sound casual while looking for any excuse to cancel the trip. Marcus stroked my cheek with that false tenderness that churned my stomach. "That's why we chose a very easy and well-maintained trail," he assured me. "It's a hike even senior groups do all the time. Plus, Cassandra and I will be there to take care of you every step of the way." Yes, they would be there to take care of us until the exact moment they decided to push us off a cliff. That night, when they finally left, Thomas and I sat in our living room, trembling not just from the cold, but from the absolute terror we had been holding back for hours. "We can't go," I said, grabbing his hands. "We just can't. We'll make up some excuse." "If we don't go," Thomas replied in a grave voice, "they'll find another way to kill us. Maybe something that looks even more accidental, like a house fire or a home invasion gone wrong. At least in the mountains we know what they're going to try to do." His words had a terrible logic, but they didn't comfort me at all. "So what do you suggest?" I asked, desperate to find some solution that would save our lives. Thomas was thoughtful for a few minutes before answering. "We're going to go, but we're going to be prepared. I'm going to hide my phone and set it to record everything that happens. If we manage to survive, we'll have evidence. And if we don't," his voice broke, "at least someone will know the truth." On Friday night we could barely touch our dinner. We knew it might be our last meal together in our house, in that kitchen where we had shared so many happy moments when we were a real family. Thomas reviewed his will one more time, making sure that if something happened to us, at least Cassandra wouldn't get everything without there being some record of our suspicions. "I wrote a letter," he confessed, pulling a sealed envelope from his desk. "It's addressed to your sister Dorothy. In it, I explain everything we know about Sarah's death and what we believe Cassandra plans to do to us. I hid it in the safe deposit box at the bank. If we don't return from this trip, at least she'll know where to look for the truth." That night, we went to bed holding each other, whispering words of love that could be our last. "If something happens to me," Thomas said, "I want you to know that these 35 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite everything, despite the mistakes and the secrets, I love you more than my own life." I cried in silence, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body, the smell of his cologne. Saturday dawned with a clear sky that seemed to mock our situation. Cassandra arrived early, practically bouncing with energy that chilled my blood. "Good morning, you two," she called from the front door. "Ready for your big adventure?" Marcus appeared behind her, radiant as if this were the happiest day of his life. During breakfast, which we could barely eat, Cassandra explained the route we would take in detail. "It's a beautiful trail," she said, spreading a map on the table. "It leads to a lookout point where you can see the entire valley. People say the views are absolutely spectacular." Her eyes shone with an enthusiasm that seemed demonic. Of course the views would be spectacular. They would be the last we would see in our lives. "The trail has some steep parts," Marcus added as if giving us useful tourist information, "but nothing that active folks like you can't handle." His comment about our supposed hiking abilities sounded like a cruel joke. We were two people approaching 60 who barely walked through the neighborhood once in a while. As we loaded the SUV, I saw Cassandra meticulously checking her backpack, making sure she had everything she needed for her plan. I saw rope, a small folding shovel, and something that looked like a flare gun. "What's that for?" I asked, pointing to the gun. "For safety," she replied without missing a beat. "If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a distress signal." Of course, they would send a distress signal after pushing us off a cliff so our bodies could be found and it would be confirmed that it was a tragic accident during a family hike. Everything was calculated. Every detail had been planned to make our murders look perfectly natural. The drive to the mountains lasted nearly 3 hours that felt like an eternity. Marcus put on upbeat country music and sang along with the songs as if we were really going on a fun family outing. Cassandra drove carefully, obeying all the speed limits, stopping at every traffic light. She didn't want to risk an accident that would ruin her perfect plans. During the trip, Thomas discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. Everything that happened from that moment on would be recorded. If we managed to survive, we would have proof. If not, at least the truth wouldn't die with us. When we finally arrived at the trailhead in the Chattahoochee National Forest, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would beat out of my chest. The place was beautiful with tall pines and the sound of a nearby stream. But for me, it had become the setting for my own execution. Cassandra and Marcus took their backpacks out of the car, smiling and joking as if it were the happiest day of their lives. "Ready for the adventure?" Cassandra asked. And for the first time in 28 years, I saw the same cold glint in her eyes that she'd had the night she killed her sister. The trail started out relatively easy, winding between lush trees and moss-covered rocks. Marcus walked ahead of us, constantly taking photos and videos, commenting on the beauty of the landscape. "Look at that hawk," he exclaimed, pointing toward a bird circling overhead, "and those mountain laurels are beautiful." His performance was perfect, that of a loving son-in-law enjoying a special day with his in-laws. Cassandra walked behind us, supposedly to make sure we didn't fall behind. But I could feel her eyes on our backs like daggers. Every time I turned to look at her, she smiled with that grin she had perfected over 28 years of lies. "How are you doing, Mama?" "Daddy?" she would ask with fake concern. "Need to stop and rest?" After about an hour and a half of hiking, we began to climb a steeper part of the trail. My legs already felt heavy and Thomas was breathing with difficulty. We weren't used to this kind of exercise and our murderous children knew it perfectly. They had chosen a route that would physically exhaust us, making us vulnerable for when the time came to execute their plan. "We're almost at the overlook," Marcus announced. Although according to the map I had studied at home, we still had at least another 45 minutes of hiking. His lie confirmed that they had no intention of reaching the real lookout. The place where they planned to kill us must be much closer. During the hike, I tried to memorize every detail of the trail, every distinctive tree, every rock formation that could serve as a reference if I managed to survive and needed to explain to the police exactly where everything had happened. Thomas was doing the same, and we occasionally exchanged glances loaded with terror and determination. We knew we were walking toward our deaths, but we also knew it was our only chance to get evidence against our murderers. "Oh, look at that!" Marcus suddenly shouted, pointing to a rock formation that loomed to our right. "That cliff has an incredible view. Why don't we climb up there to take some special anniversary photos?" My blood ran cold. There it was, the place they had chosen for our murder. The cliff rose about 100 feet above the main trail, accessible by a secondary path that seemed much more treacherous than the one we had been following. The rocks were loose. There were fewer trees to grab onto in case we stumbled. And from the top, you could see a precipice that fell into a deep gorge full of jagged rocks. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said, trying to sound casual. "That trail looks pretty dangerous for people our age." But Cassandra had already started walking toward the turnoff, carrying her backpack full of safety equipment that I knew she wouldn't use to save us. "Come on, Mama," she said with that voice she used when she was a teenager and wanted to convince me of something. "It'll only take a few minutes. Besides, Marcus is right. The photos from up there are going to be spectacular." The way she said spectacular made me tremble. They would be spectacular for whoever saw them afterward as evidence of our accident. Thomas squeezed my hand discreetly, reminding me that his phone was recording everything. We had to go on. We had to go all the way to get the evidence we needed. If we refused now, they would simply find another opportunity, another place, another excuse to kill us. The climb to the cliff was exhausting. The loose rocks slid under our feet and more than once I was about to fall. But the most terrifying thing was realizing how perfect this place was for a murder. If someone accidentally tripped and fell from the top, There would be no way to survive. And most importantly, there would be no witnesses. Almost there, Marcus shouted from above, where he had already arrived with the agility of someone who had scouted this route carefully. Cassandra followed him and then helped Thomas and me complete the last few feet of the climb. Her hands on my arms felt like the claws of a vulture. The overlook was indeed spectacular. From there you could see the whole valley, the mountains in the distance, and the creek winding through the trees. In any other circumstance, it would have been a beautiful moment to share with family. But knowing what I knew, the place seemed like the perfect setting for a nightmare. "Come over here for the photos," Marcus shouted, positioning himself near the edge of the cliff. "I want the valley to be in the background." Thomas and I approached slowly, each step bringing us closer to our final destination. I could see Cassandra strategically positioning herself behind us, calculating angles, measuring distances. "Perfect," Marcus exclaimed, raising his camera. "Now hug each other and smile for your anniversary photo." Thomas and I hugged, probably for the last time, while he took picture after picture. Every click of the camera seemed like a countdown to our execution. "Take one more," Cassandra suggested, moving closer to us. "But this time stand back a little so the landscape looks better in the frame." One step back meant being exactly on the edge of the precipice. Thomas and I exchanged a look. The time had come. We moved back as we were told, feeling the solid ground disappear under our feet and only the emptiness of the abyss remaining behind us. Marcus raised the camera one more time, but this time I saw something different in his eyes. There was no longer any need to pretend. The mask had fallen. "Smile," he said in a voice that was no longer smooth at all. "This is going to be your last photo." At that moment, Cassandra lunged toward us with her arms outstretched. The plan was simple. Push us backwards so we would fall into the void, take some photos of the accident scene, and then go down to discover our broken bodies. But Thomas had been preparing for this moment. In the last second, he managed to grab Cassandra's wrist and pull her forward. "If we're going to die, you're coming with us," he shouted with a fury I had never seen in him before. For a moment, all four of us were teetering on the edge of the cliff, holding on to each other in a macabre dance between life and death. Marcus screamed and tried to help Cassandra, but the weight of all of us was too much. I felt the ground give way under my feet, felt gravity begin to win the battle. And then the four of us fell together, locked in a deadly embrace, screaming as the air whistled around us and the rocky ground approached at breakneck speed. In those seconds that lasted an eternity, I thought of Sarah, of how she must have felt when Cassandra pushed her into the creek 28 years ago. The impact was brutal. I heard the horrible sound of bones cracking, the sound of my own body shattering against the rocks. The pain was indescribable. But even more terrible was the taste of blood in my mouth and the certainty that this time Cassandra had won. This time there would be no witnesses to tell the truth. But then I heard Thomas's voice, weak but clear. "Margaret, don't move. Play dead." And I realized something incredible. I was still alive. The pain was so intense I thought I would go crazy. Every fiber of my body screamed in agony. I felt blood running down my face and something wet and sticky soaking my clothes. But Thomas's voice echoed in my ears like a divine command. "Play dead." With a willpower I didn't know I possessed, I remained completely still, controlling even my breathing so it would be imperceptible. A few feet away, I could hear the moans of pain from Cassandra and Marcus. They had also survived the fall, but from their groans they seemed to be in worse condition than we were. "Marcus," I heard my daughter's broken voice, "are you okay?" Her concern for her husband made my stomach churn. This woman, who had murdered her own sister and had tried to kill us, was still capable of feeling love for someone. "I think I broke my arm," Marcus moaned. "It hurt so much, Cassandra." "And what about the old folks?" The disrespectful way he referred to us confirmed what I already knew. We had never been family to him. We were just obstacles on his way to our money. I heard movement as if Cassandra were crawling toward us. My heart was beating so fast I was afraid she would hear it. "They're dead," she announced after a few minutes that felt like hours. "Both of them have their eyes open, but they're not breathing." Her lie filled me with a strange hope. If she believed we were dead, maybe we would have a chance. "Perfect," Marcus whispered with a satisfaction that chilled my blood. "It worked just like we planned. Well, except for the part where we fell too." I heard his bitter laugh. "At least we won't have to pretend we love them anymore." For the next few minutes that felt like an eternity, Cassandra and Marcus discussed their situation. Both were injured, but they could move. The plan now was to crawl until they found a place from which they could call for help, and then tell the story of how they had miraculously survived a tragic accident that had killed their poor in-laws. "Remember the story," Cassandra said to Marcus. "We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Daddy's feet. He tripped and trying to grab on, he pulled Mama with him. We tried to help, but we fell too. It's important that our stories match." "I know," Marcus replied. "We've practiced this 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor us, we lost our dear in-laws in a horrible accident." His performance was so convincing that if I hadn't lived the truth, I would have believed every word. Gradually, their voices faded as they crawled toward what they hoped would be their salvation. When silence finally fell, Thomas whispered my name so low I could barely hear it. "Margaret, are you okay?" I answered in the same whisper, confirming that I was alive but terribly injured. "My left leg is broken," he told me in a voice choked with pain. "And I think I have several fractured ribs. What about you?" I did a mental inventory of my body. I felt a stabbing pain in my right arm. My head throbbed as if someone were hitting it with a hammer, and there was definitely something wrong with my shoulder, but I was alive, and that was more than I had hoped for. "We're bad, but we're alive," I whispered. "The phone," Thomas said urgently. "It's still recording. Everything is on there." He tried to reach for it, but the movement made him cry out in pain. "I can't reach it. It's in my pocket, but I can't move my leg." "We need help," I said, stating the obvious. "We need to call for rescue." "My phone works," Thomas managed to say, "but there's no signal down here." That was the most terrifying part of our situation. We were alive, but trapped at the bottom of a gorge, injured, and with no way to communicate with the outside world. If no one came to look for us, we would die here slowly from thirst, hunger, or our wounds. "Thomas," I whispered, "before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything that really happened the night Sarah died." My husband sighed deeply, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 28 years. "That night," he began in a trembling voice, "Sarah came to find me at the shop. She was furious. She had papers in her hands, bank statements showing evidence that Cassandra had been stealing money from our accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. Sarah had been investigating because she had noticed discrepancies in our savings." The physical pain mingled with the emotional pain as I listened to the truth that had been hidden for decades. "Sarah wanted to confront Cassandra that same night," Thomas continued. "I tried to calm her down, to convince her to wait until the next day, but she was determined. She said she couldn't sleep knowing her younger sister was stealing from us." "And you followed her?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "I followed her because I was afraid of what might happen. I knew Sarah's temper when she got angry, and I also knew, well, I had noticed something strange about Cassandra lately. A coldness that sent shivers down my spine. When I got to the creek," Thomas continued, "I found them screaming at each other. Sarah had the papers in her hand, waving them in Cassandra's face. 'You're a thief,' she was yelling. 'You're stealing from our own parents.' Cassandra denied everything. She said Sarah was crazy, that she was making things up." My heart raced as I imagined the scene. My 2 daughters facing off in the dark, one accusing the other of betrayal. What happened next? Henry paused for a long time before continuing. "Sarah told her that if she didn't return the money and confess everything to us, she would tell us the truth herself. Cassandra went berserk. She yelled that Sarah had always been the favorite, that she had always had everything easy, that it was time for things to change. And then, Thomas's voice broke. Cassandra pushed Sarah. It wasn't an accident. She pushed her with all her strength, deliberately. I saw Sarah trying to keep her balance, saw her arms flailing desperately, looking for something to grab onto. But it was too late. Tears streamed down my cheeks, mixing with the blood from my wounds. Why did you never tell me the truth? Thomas sighed deeply. Because when I got to where Cassandra was, she was crying, trembling, telling me over and over that it had been an accident, that she hadn't meant to do it. She begged me not to tell you anything, that she couldn't lose you too. Daddy, she said, Sarah tripped when she was trying to hit me. I just defended myself and she lost her balance. But you knew it was a lie, I murmured from the bottom of my heart. Yes, but she was my daughter, Margaret. My only surviving daughter. How could I turn her over to the police? How could I destroy what was left of our family? His justification hurt as much as my physical injuries. And the stolen money? I continued. Cassandra promised me she would return it little by little. She swore it had been a bad decision, that she had been desperate, that it would never happen again. But she never returned a single penny. In fact, she kept stealing, and I kept quiet because every day that passed made me more of an accomplice to her crime. Just then we heard voices in the distance. Cassandra and Marcus had managed to find help. Soon, rescue teams would be here and our murderous children would play the role of their lives, the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. The voices got closer and closer, accompanied by the sound of a helicopter flying over the area. The rescue team had arrived and with them came the most crucial moment of our lives. Thomas and I had to make a decision in a matter of minutes. Should we continue to pretend to be dead until we found the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth, or risk being rescued along with our murderers? Margaret, Thomas whispered urgently. The phone recorded everything that happened up there. We have Marcus's confession about the plan. We have Cassandra admitting that we are obstacles. We have everything. But if they find us alive now, they can destroy the evidence before we manage to hand it over to the authorities. He was right. If Cassandra and Marcus realized that we had survived and heard their confessions, they would find a way to silence us forever. This time it wouldn't be an accident. It would be something much more direct and definitive. We had to wait for the perfect moment. They're down here, Cassandra's voice shouted from above. My parents, please hurry. Her performance was perfect, her voice broken with pain and despair. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed she was a daughter devastated by the loss of her parents. Ma'am, stay calm, an authoritative voice replied, which must have belonged to the head of the rescue team. We're going to come down to evaluate the situation. Can you and your husband move? I heard the sound of ropes and equipment being prepared for the descent. Marcus had perfected his role as the grieving son-in-law. I can't believe this happened, he sobbed. We were taking pictures, so happy. It all happened so fast. A rock came loose and they fell. Every word was a stab in my heart because I knew he would repeat those same words to the police, to the media, to anyone who wanted to hear his version of events. The rescuers began to descend. I could hear their voices getting closer, the sound of their boots against the rock, the clinking of their equipment. Thomas discreetly squeezed my hand, reminding me that we had to keep up the act no matter what happened. We have victims here, one of the rescuers shouted upon finding us. 2 people at the bottom of the gorge, looks like a fall from significant height. He approached us and began to examine us. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing so shallow it was almost imperceptible. I felt his hands checking for a pulse on my neck, his ear close to my mouth trying to detect breathing. This one still has a faint pulse, he announced, referring to Thomas. The woman? I'm not sure. I need the medical team down here immediately. My heart raced. The plan was working. They would believe that Thomas was on the verge of death but still alive, while I would be close enough to death to not be an immediate threat. For the next few minutes, which felt like hours, the paramedics worked on us. I felt them put an oxygen mask on me, check my wounds and secure me to a stretcher. The whole time I had to fight against every instinct in my body that screamed at me to open my eyes, to ask for help, to stop pretending. The man is stable but critical, I heard one of the paramedics report over the radio. The woman is in very serious condition. Pulse is barely perceptible. We need to transport them to the hospital immediately. Perfect. They would take us to the hospital where we would have the opportunity to talk to the authorities without Cassandra and Marcus being able to silence us. During the ascent on the stretchers, I could hear Marcus's fake sobs and the words of comfort that the rescuers offered him and Cassandra. You were so brave to survive this, someone said to them. It's a miracle that you're relatively okay. If only they knew that the real miracle was that Thomas and I were alive to tell the truth. In the medical helicopter as we flew toward the hospital, I could feel Thomas's presence on the stretcher next to mine. The paramedics were focused on keeping him stable, and from their conversations, I understood that he was in critical condition. His injuries were more serious than mine, and for a terrible moment, I feared he might die before we had the chance to reveal the truth. Ma'am, I heard one of the paramedics say to me, if you can hear me, hold on. We'll be at the hospital in a few minutes. His voice was gentle, full of a genuine compassion that contrasted dramatically with the falsehood I had been hearing from my own family. When we arrived at the hospital, the chaos was immediate. Doctors and nurses ran from one side to the other, shouting medical orders I didn't understand. I was taken directly to an emergency room where they began to work on my injuries. I had to keep pretending to be unconscious, but I also had to find a way to communicate with someone I could trust. "Doctor," I heard a nurse say, "her vital signs are strange. Her pulse is stronger than we would expect for someone in her supposed condition." My heart skipped a beat. They had discovered me. I was such a bad actress that my own body was betraying me. The doctor murmured. "It happens sometimes in cases of extreme trauma. The body has mysterious ways of clinging to life. Let's keep a close watch on her. The next few hours will be crucial." A short while later, I heard footsteps approaching and Cassandra's voice outside the room. "Doctor, how are they? Can we see them? We need to be with them." "We've done everything we can," the doctor replied. "The next few hours are critical. You can see them briefly, but please, they need rest." Cassandra made a sound that was supposedly a sob of pain, but to me sounded like a sigh of relief. "Can we see them?" Marcus asked. "Just for a few minutes. We need to say goodbye just in case." The doctor agreed, and soon I heard footsteps approaching my bed. It was the most dangerous moment of all. I had to convince my murderous daughter that I was really dying. I felt Cassandra's presence next to my bed. Her hand touched mine, and it was all I could do not to pull my hand away immediately. "Mama," she whispered, "if you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. I'm so sorry this happened." Her words were poisoned honey, sweet on the surface but deadly in their essence. Marcus approached from the other side. "Margaret, dear," he murmured. "You've been like a mother to me. We'll never forget you." Liar. The only reason they wouldn't forget me was because they would have to live with the knowledge that they had murdered me. But then Cassandra leaned closer to my ear and whispered something that chilled my blood. "I hope you've learned your lesson, Mama. You should never have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried, just like Sarah." At that moment I knew our plan had worked. Cassandra had just confessed, and even though I had no way to record it, there was a nurse in the room who had heard every word. Cassandra's whisper echoed in my ears like a direct confession of her guilt. She had mentioned Sarah. She had admitted that some truths should remain buried. And most importantly, she had acknowledged that our questions about finances had been the reason for our accident. But I needed more than that. I needed a full confession that couldn't be misinterpreted or denied later. The nurse who had overheard the comment, a young woman named Lisa according to her ID badge, had frozen next to the monitoring machine. I saw through my half-closed eyelids as her eyes widened in surprise and horror. She had heard something she shouldn't have heard, and her expression told me she understood the implications of those words perfectly. "What did you say about Sarah?" Marcus whispered, obviously surprised by the mention of the dead sister. Cassandra tensed, realizing she had said too much. "Nothing," she muttered. "I just meant, well, Mama always wondered what really happened that night. I guess it doesn't matter anymore." But it did matter. And Marcus was smart enough to realize that his wife had made a mistake. "Cassandra," he said in a tense voice, "let's go. The doctors need space to work." I could feel the tension between them, the mutual understanding that they had said too much in the wrong place. After they left, the nurse Lisa approached my bed. "Ma'am," she whispered so low I could barely hear her. "I know you can hear me. What I just heard is not normal. If you are in danger, you need to tell me somehow." Her voice had an urgency that filled me with hope. Someone else had started to suspect. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, I moved my index finger. It was the smallest possible movement, but Lisa noticed it immediately. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're pretending to be unconscious." I moved my finger again, this time twice. "Yes, listen," she said, leaning even closer. "I'm going to pretend I'm checking your monitors. If you are in danger from those people who were just here, move your finger 3 times." Without hesitation, I moved my finger 3 times. Lisa gasped. "They did this to you." 3 more movements. The nurse moved away from my bed and pretended to check my 4 while she processed what she had just discovered. I could see in her expression that she was struggling with the decision of what to do. Finally, she approached me again. "I'm going to talk to the doctor in charge," she whispered. "But I need you to keep pretending until we can protect you. Do you understand?" I moved my finger once. The next few minutes were agonizing. Lisa left the room and I was left alone, waiting and praying that she would believe my story and take the right actions. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Lisa, accompanied by an older man who must have been the chief doctor and, surprisingly, 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the doctor said in a low voice. "Nurse Lisa told me about your situation. If you can hear me, we need you to know that you are safe now. The officers are here to protect you." A wave of relief so intense almost broke my act. "Can you open your eyes?" one of the officers asked. Slowly, very slowly, I opened my eyes. The hospital light blinded me for a moment, but I gradually managed to focus on the worried faces surrounding me. "Thank God," Lisa murmured. "I thought I was going crazy." "Ma'am," said the police officer, a middle-aged man with a serious expression. "I'm Detective Williams. We understand you may be in a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what really happened on that mountain?" My voice came out as a raspy whisper after hours of pretending to be unconscious. My daughter and her husband pushed us." The next few hours were a whirlwind of statements, recordings, and revelations. I told Detective Williams everything I knew. Sarah's death, Cassandra's thefts, the pressure to change our will, and finally the plan to murder us on the mountain. But the most important thing was the recording on Thomas's phone. "Your husband has recorded evidence?" the detective asked, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Yes," I replied. "Everything is on his phone. The confessions, the plans, everything." The detective immediately went to the room where Thomas was being treated. Thomas had regained consciousness about an hour after me, and when the detective explained the situation, he handed over his phone without hesitation. "Here's everything," he said in a weak but firm voice. 28 years of lies and the truth about what happened today. While the police technicians analyzed the recording, Cassandra and Marcus remained in the waiting room, playing their part as devastated family members to other hospital visitors. They had no idea that their careful performance was about to end forever. "The recording is clear," the detective announced after an hour. "We have explicit confessions about Sarah's murder, admissions about stealing money, and direct evidence of premeditated attempted murder against you too. It's more than enough to arrest them." "But are you going to arrest them here?" I asked, concerned about our safety. "If they realize we're alive and talking." The detective nodded, understanding my concern. "We already have officers in position. As soon as we have the arrest warrant signed, we'll take them in. In the meantime, you are both under police protection." The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Cassandra and Marcus were down there probably talking to other patients' relatives, receiving condolences for our deaths, planning how to handle our funeral and inheritance. They had no idea that upstairs in the hospital rooms, we were tearing down their carefully constructed world of lies. "Is there anything else?" the detective said, pulling out a folder of papers. "After hearing your story, we investigated your daughter's finances. Not only is she bankrupt, as you suspected, but Marcus also owes money to some very dangerous people, unofficial lenders who don't take excuses." My blood ran cold. "You mean we weren't just inconvenient to them?" "You were their only salvation," the detective confirmed. "With your inheritance, they could pay off their debts and start over. Without you, they would probably have faced serious consequences in a few weeks." That revelation added a new dimension to the betrayal. They hadn't just seen us as obstacles. They had seen us as their financial lifesaver. Our deaths were not just convenient for them. It was absolutely necessary for their survival. "And what will happen to our grandchildren?" I asked, feeling a new wave of pain at the thought of Cassandra and Marcus's innocent children. "Social services will take temporary custody of them," the detective replied gently. "But as I understand it, you could apply for custody once you recover from your injuries." The idea of raising the children of our own murderers was overwhelming, but it was also the only way to ensure that something good would come out of this nightmare. Those children were innocent and they deserved a chance to grow up in a home where love was real, not feigned. "It's time," the detective announced when an officer entered the room with papers in hand. "The warrants are signed. We're going to arrest them now." Through the window of my room that overlooked the hospital parking lot, I could see police officers discreetly positioning themselves. The moment I had been waiting for 28 years had finally arrived. "Cassandra Williams and Marcus Williams," I heard the firm voice of the officer in charge. "You are under arrest for the murder of Sarah Williams and the attempted murder of Margaret and Thomas Williams." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Marcus's hysterical voice. "What are you talking about? We're the victims here. Our in-laws died in an accident. Sir, the officer replied calmly, your in-laws are alive and they have provided complete evidence of your crimes. There was a moment of absolute silence followed by a scream of desperation from Cassandra. That's impossible. We saw them die. They were dead. Her involuntary confession was captured by the police recorders, adding another piece of evidence to their case. Through the radio, I heard Marcus begin to blame Cassandra. It was all her idea. I didn't want to do any of this. He forced me. She said it was the only way we could survive. And Cassandra, in desperation, screamed, you were the one who suggested the cliff. You planned all of this. You said it would look like a perfect accident. In a matter of minutes, the alliance that had lasted for years fell apart as each one tried to save their own skin. Detective Williams returned to my room an hour later with an expression of satisfaction mixed with sadness. They're arrested and on their way to the station, he informed me. They're both trying to blame each other, which only strengthens our case. But there's something else I need to tell you. What else? I asked, though I wasn't sure my heart could handle any more revelations. During the arrest, we found this in your daughter's backpack, he said, showing me a small digital recorder. Apparently, she had been recording her conversations with you and your husband for the past few weeks, probably looking for evidence that you suspected something. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? The detective sighed. It means she knew you were starting to discover the truth. The trip to the mountain wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a direct response to your suspicions. In one of the recordings, you can clearly hear Marcus telling her, we have to act fast before they go to the police. The depth of the planning and the coldness of the calculation took my breath away. They hadn't just planned to kill us. They had been monitoring our conversations, evaluating the level of danger we posed to them. We were mice in a maze, and they had been the scientists observing our every move. There's something else, the detective continued. We found in the investigation of their finances that your daughter had not only forged your signature on several documents trying to access your bank accounts, but Marcus had also taken out life insurance policies on both of you without your knowledge. Every new revelation was like another stab. My own daughter had not only planned to murder me, she had been actively stealing from me, forging my signature, and violating every principle of family trust one had tried to instill in her. How much money did they steal in total? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. About $75,000 over the last 7 years, the detective replied. Small amounts that they thought you wouldn't notice, but which when added up amount to a significant sum. The money Thomas and I had saved over decades of hard work, penny by penny, had been financing our daughter's life of luxury while she planned our murder. The following days in the hospital were a whirlwind of police interviews, visits from lawyers, and calls from news media that had picked up the story. The local press had titled the case, "The Most Horrific Family Betrayal in Georgia History," and reporters from all over the country wanted to hear our version of events. My sister Dorothy arrived from Columbus crying and hugging me as if she hadn't seen me in decades. "Margaret," she said over and over. "I always knew there was something strange about Cassandra after Sarah's death, but I never imagined she was capable of this." Her words comforted me because they confirmed that my maternal instincts hadn't been completely blind. And the kids? I asked about my grandchildren who were now in the temporary custody of social services. "I saw them yesterday," Dorothy replied sadly. "They're confused, asking why their parents can't come home. They're too young to understand what really happened." The lawyer we had hired, Mr. Harrison, who had prepared our will, came to see us with news about the legal process. "The case is solid," he assured us. "With the recordings, the confessions during the arrest, and all the financial evidence, it's almost impossible for them to escape significant convictions." But then he added something that chilled me to the bone. "However, they are trying to negotiate a lesser guilty plea by claiming it was a crime of passion, not premeditated." "A crime of passion?" I exclaimed indignantly. "They planned this for weeks, bought special equipment, and chose the perfect place." Mr. Harrison nodded gravely. "I know, and we have evidence of premeditation, but their lawyers are going to argue that it was a desperate decision made under extreme financial pressure." The idea that they could receive reduced sentences for their crimes filled me with fury. They had murdered Sarah. They had tried to murder us. They had stolen our money for years, and now they wanted to present themselves as victims of circumstances. What can we do to ensure they get what they deserve? I asked. Testify, Mr. Harrison replied simply. Your testimony, combined with all the evidence, will be crucial for the jury to understand the true nature of these crimes. But I warn you, it's going to be emotionally devastating to face your daughter in court. He was right. The idea of looking Cassandra in the eyes during the trial, of listening to her lawyers try to justify the unjustifiable, of publicly reliving every moment of this nightmare was overwhelming. But it was what I had to do for Sarah, for us, and for my grandchildren who deserved to know the truth about their parents. 3 weeks after the arrest, Thomas and I were finally able to go home. Our wounds had healed enough to allow us to move, although he still needed a walker and I had my arm in a sling. The house felt strange, as if it were the set of a play after all the actors had left. Everything was exactly as we had left it on the day of our family outing. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. The bed was unmade. The flowers Cassandra had brought me that week were still on the kitchen table, now withered and dead, a perfect metaphor for our relationship. It was as if time had stopped at the moment our normal lives ended forever. Do you think we'll ever be happy again? I asked Thomas that first night back as we lay in our familiar bed. He hugged me with his uninjured arm and sighed deeply. I don't know, Margaret, he said. But we're alive. We have the truth on our side, and for the first time in 28 years, we don't have to live with secrets. The trial began 7 months later. On the day I had to testify, I looked Cassandra directly in the eyes for the first time since the arrest. I saw no remorse, no pain. I didn't see the daughter I had raised. I saw a cold and calculating stranger who had disguised herself as my daughter for decades. When I finished my testimony, after recounting every horrible detail of our experience, I addressed her directly from the witness stand. Cassandra, I don't know who you are, but you are no longer my daughter. My daughter died the night you killed Sarah, and what has been living in her place for 28 years is a monster that I unwittingly helped raise. The jury deliberated for 4 days before finding Cassandra guilty of first-degree murder for Sarah's death and first-degree attempted murder for what she did to us. Marcus received the same conviction as an accomplice. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, 1 year later, Thomas and I have begun the process of formally adopting our grandchildren. They are beautiful and innocent children who deserve a chance to grow up knowing what true love is, not the manipulative and toxic love they received from their biological parents. Every night when I tuck them in, I tell them about their Aunt Sarah, the sister they never knew. I tell them about her kindness, her honesty, her dreams of helping people. I tell them that they carry her spirit in them, and that as long as they remember her, she will never truly be gone. Thomas has slowly returned to his shop, though he can't work as many hours as before. The fall left him with chronic pain that will never fully go away. But he says it's a small price to pay for being alive. As for me, I've returned to the library, though now I see the world through different eyes. I look at the families that come in, parents with their children, and I wonder what secrets they're hiding behind their smiles. I've learned that evil doesn't always announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes it comes wearing the face of someone you love, someone you raised, someone you would give your life for. But I've also learned about the incredible strength of the human spirit. Thomas and I survived a fall that should have killed us. We survived because we refused to give up, because we held on to hope even when everything seemed lost, because we trusted each other when we couldn't trust anyone else. When I look back on everything that happened, I realize that the signs were always there. Sarah trying to tell us something was wrong. The strange behavior. The financial discrepancies. But we didn't want to see them because seeing them would have meant admitting that our family wasn't perfect, that one of our children was capable of terrible things. And that's the lesson I want you to take from my story today. Don't ignore the red flags in your life. Don't let your love for someone blind you to their faults. And most importantly, don't let anyone, no matter how much you love them, make you doubt your own instincts. Something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone's behavior doesn't add up, there's probably a reason. And if you feel like you're in danger, you probably are. Trust yourself. Protect yourself. And never, ever assume that just because someone is family, they have your best interests at heart. Thomas and I were lucky. We survived to tell our story. But Sarah didn't. And somewhere out there are other families living with secrets, other parents being deceived by their children, other siblings in danger from people they trust. So I'm telling you this story not just as a cautionary tale, but as a wake-up call. Look around you. Really look. Are the people in your life who they claim to be? Are you ignoring warning signs because it's easier than facing the truth? Because I promise you, facing the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than ignoring it until it's too late. We lost 28 years living with a lie. 28 years where we could have had justice for Sarah, where we could have been free from Cassandra's manipulation, where we could have lived without fear. Don't lose your years to lies. Don't sacrifice your safety for the illusion of family harmony. And don't ever let anyone convince you that your suspicions are just paranoia. Sometimes paranoia is just pattern recognition. Sometimes that feeling in your gut is your survival instinct trying to save your life. Listen to it. My name is Margaret. I'm 58 years old. And I'm here to tell you that I survived my own daughter's attempt to murder me. But more than that, I'm here to tell you that you can survive whatever darkness you're facing too. It won't be easy. The truth never is. But it will set you free. And freedom, my dear, is worth any price. Now, I want you to think about this. Is there someone in your life right now who's making you feel uneasy? Someone whose behavior doesn't quite add up? Someone who's a little too interested in your finances, your will, your life insurance? Don't wait until you're at the bottom of a cliff to find out if your suspicions are right. Heck no. Protect yourself now. Because once you're falling, it's too late to grow wings. This is Auntie D reminding you to stay vigilant, stay strong, and never let anyone convince you that you're crazy for protecting yourself. Your life might depend on it. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share it. You never know whose life you might save. And remember, I'm here for you. Leave your thoughts in the comments, share your own stories if you feel comfortable, and let's build a community where we look out for each other, where we don't ignore the warning signs, where we protect the vulnerable, and where we always choose truth over comfortable lies. Because at the end of the day, the truth might hurt, but lies can kill. Stay safe out there, my loves. And remember, family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones you choose, not the ones you're born to. God bless you all, and until next time, this is Auntie D saying, trust your gut, protect your peace, and never let anyone push you off a cliff, literally or figuratively. Now go ahead and hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Subscribe so you don't miss any of my stories. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Your story matters. Your safety matters. And you matter. Take care of yourself because you're worth protecting. This is Auntie D, and I'll see you in the next one.